Good morning, everyone. It's always a great honor and privilege to present, especially this topic. It's a topic that I've felt passionate about for a very long time, something that I included as part of my PhD research, have continued to do it with a number of various stakeholders that I'll elaborate on a little bit later on. As I said, my name is DrAlanBarnard. I'm CEO of Goldwood Research Labs, and my job is to do research and to have fun and to partner with some amazing companies and individuals to find relatively simple solutions to seemingly complex problems, especially those that have been around for a long time. And that's the topic of this discussion, is why don't we learn from experience and frequently end up learning the wrong lessons? Is it possible to come up with a simple way to solve those two problems? Before I start my section, I want to quickly introduce you to Barry. He's my co-presenter today. I'll just quickly tell you where I met Barry at the Odyssey program. And what happened was he came to the alumni program. Dr. Goldrat asked for somebody to come and present what they've done since they're freshmen. And Barry came down very confidently, and he started writing out all these clouds, and he was just about finished with a core conflict when Ellie sort of came racing down, and he went like this. He said, "This is all wrong." And I thought, this guy, without running away, wow, what courage. I need to speak to him. I need to find out what he does and why he does it. So if you can introduce yourself quickly, Barry.
I was a teacher of students with severe disabilities, and I read the goal about maybe 16 or 17 years ago, and I realized that we have all the problems of the goal, but yet it's very hard to figure out from the goal or from the other books how to implement. And I've been trying to do it for many, many years, and I moved on. I got a master's degree, I got a PhD, I went to Odyssey several times, worked on it a lot, and we made small progress. We made small progress here and there, but we didn't have any really big jumps in performance that you would like to see with a TOC implementation. So over the last few years, I've been at Alan to try and you got to help me with this, you got to help me with this, you got to help me with this. And this year, we've, I think, made some really big gains with Alan's help on Skype from South Africa to Connecticut. And it's been an amazing collaboration.
Thank you. So Barry will highlight a little bit later exactly what problems he's been working on. So let's start off with a summary of the problem. It ain't so much the things we don't know that gets us into trouble, it's the things we know that just ain't so. And by the way, some know that this, in fact, wasn't Mark Twain that said this. It was potentially a few other people. So as soon as you think you really know something, that's always the warning light, right? As do we really know? So let's start off. I have a few acknowledgements. Great scientists that have contributed to scientific method. This is going to be the basis, the foundation of what we thought, well, if we're looking for a giant, that's a pretty good place to start. Hard sciences seem to be learning much faster and much more effectively than anybody else. And part of it has to do with the essence of the scientific method, in that the aim of it is not to try and prove yourself wrong. Right, the aim is to try and prove yourself wrong, to invalidate your hypothesis. Dr. Ellie Goldrat, inspirational forward, and the goal was the first thing that inspired me. I'll cover that a little bit later. And then later on, he really encouraged me. It started formulating the process for how do you audit companies. When we go in and we are trying to audit an implementation of TOC, how do you go about doing that? Because we were realizing that was where a lot of things were getting lost in the noise. Assumptions are made at the beginning. If you do a good job, those are captured in the strategy and tactic trees, and then they never checked again. It's almost like a project plan that you leave in your bottom drawer. You use it to gain consensus, and they never check it again. Eli Schwagenheim was the first one that had highlighted this. He talked about surprises in Cambridge conference how important it was to use surprises as a primary trigger for us to learn from experience. And there's also a number of other methodologies that we've studied. I've included a very detailed appendix into this presentation, so if you're not familiar with any of these, I'd highly recommend that you go and study them. We've worked with them, we've checked them. Each of them have resulted in very good results where they are applied, but they all struggle to not be applied consistently and frequently don't get us the right lessons. So let's start with the research question. A necessary condition for both individuals and organizations to both achieve survival, stability, and growth is the ability to learn from experience. Do you agree? None of us want to repeat mistakes, especially the ones that can really hurt us and others. And we all want to understand and capitalize on our successes. So this is not just about learning from our failures or mistakes, it's also about learning from the successes. What actually did work? This is what we need to do after every single experiment. What worked, what didn't work? And can we explain why? So despite the pressure and desire to learn, unfortunately, the research shows that we seldom do learn, and when we try, we seldom learn the right lessons. How bad is the problem? Failure is all around us. You can see it everywhere. In fact, it's much more common than successes. If you really go and study it, there's some really good text about this. We even frequently fail even if we are given second chances. So some interesting statistics, 50% of first marriages, of course, fail. Surprisingly, a much higher percentage of second and third marriages fail. 90% of heart bypass patients do not change their lifestyles, even after being told, you will die. And they keep on eating those hamburgers, right? Why is that? You've been given a chance. Why don't you learn from the experience? Only 2% of weight loss programs are successful. We keep on believing myths that are easily falsifiable. I did a test the other day in a big conference room. I asked them, which has more ribs, men or women? And we had people passionately saying it's definitely women, mostly Christians because they read the Bible. Others had forgotten that part of the Bible. It's of course very simple, right? You just count them. You say, can I count your ribs, right? And you'll find out that we both actually have 24, unless there's something wrong with you. But these are myths that are kind of stuck in our mind. It's very easy to actually check them, but we don't. We also seldom capitalize on our successes. Few authors, musicians, entrepreneurs, and others ever understand and or repeat their first successes. Why? And also the consequences of that. Many of them go into deep depression, sometimes even become suicidal as a result of that, simply because they don't understand it. There's of course that euphoria where it says I'm special, and then only to realize that next time I try to write a book or do a movie or, buy another company and it's not as successful, or move into a new job, or find another person that I have a relationship with and it turns out it's not as successful. So we struggle with both of these things. What's the relevance in terms of what we know about from a TOC perspective? Our constraint to achieving whatever goal we set is our time and attention. That's one hypothesis. There are some others. But for now, let's say that's the hypothesis. How do we waste that scarce time and attention? We make these two types of mistakes. We do things we shouldn't. We don't do the things we should. How does it waste our time? Because we keep on justifying to ourselves and to others. Why didn't we do the things that we know we should, right? You can get into this internal dialogue, spending so much time justifying to yourself, why aren't you doing the things that you should? That also wastes a lot of time and attention. Of course, we want to get to this place. There are some mistakes that are unavoidable. That the only thing that we can really do is to have a good feedback mechanism. And that's the area that we concentrated on, is to say, can we use the feedback mechanism as a way of trying to reduce or even prevent some of these type 1 and type 2 mistakes? That's what we really are aiming at with the research. So let's see. Of course, why don't we learn from experience? It's relatively simple to come up with some hypothesis. The most obvious one is you don't even try, right? That's quite obvious. So if you don't even try, then of course you won't learn. even if you do try, you don't learn anything new. And there's very good reasons for that. There's fantastic fields in terms of behavioral economics, behavioral psychology that are making breakthroughs in this field of understanding all the biases that we struggle with. Unfortunately, our mind is programmed to validate our beliefs because it needs some stability. It's not programmed to invalidate the beliefs. That's why we have all these things like racism and sexism, etc. Because if you just wanted to, you could easily test them. If you believe that some race is inferior or someone is like this, of course the problem is you can always find an exception that will validate that conclusion. But you ignore the thousands of data that's available of that specific type that could have easily invalidated your conclusion. So we're not very good at doing that for a number of different reasons. We try, we learn the wrong lesson. And I'm sure you all have those experiences, or at least know somebody that has, right? So you're given this fantastic gift. Turns out that the soulmate that you thought was absolutely your soulmate, turns out she wasn't or he wasn't. Now, what was the lesson that you learned? Right? Idiot. Never do that again, right? Until you get married a second and a third time, and the divorce rate jumps up to 60% and 70%. We try, we learn the right lesson, but we don't fully understand the implications of this lesson, which means that we don't capitalize fully on it and say, where else have I made this bad assumption? Or who else have made this bad assumption? How can I share this with them and get them to benefit from it? So this was our starting hypothesis. A couple of validations in the literature. We learn from experience that men never learn anything from experience, and it's not difficult to validate that when you look at what's happening in the financial communities with etc. Right? It's history, wars. It's very easy to find examples to validate that. Interesting that he only uses men, but nice one also from Deming was he said learning from experience is not compulsory. Neither is survival, right? And Senji, which is one of the areas that we really studied in terms of organizational learning, he said learning faster than our competitors is our only remaining sustainable competitive advantage. And he was also one that first started articulating clearly what is a major obstacle, a practical obstacle, not a psychological obstacle, but just a practical obstacle to learning, is that there are big gaps in space and time between our actions and our effects. So if you're really learning from experience, we have those mechanisms in our mind, if then, until it's wrong, right? The little frog that's born, somehow in the DNA it says, if it's smaller than you, try to eat it. If it's bigger than you, run away. Right? And it tries to eat this thing that was smaller than it, ends up almost dying because the thing is poisonous, and hopefully it will adjust the rule. In the future it should say, eat it if it's smaller than you, unless it has those bloody red dots on them. Be careful of those buggers, it can kill you. Right? So we have this mechanism to learn from experience, but we need to have the feedback quite quickly, else we lose that opportunity. Right? Touching the hot stove, that's a fast way of learning. But if you touch the hot stove and you get burnt only 2 months later, you probably could repeat that mistake a couple of times. So it was one of the practical biases that we've seen. Of course, there are psychological biases, and I'm not going to bore you with them. They all have different names. You can probably boil them down to a couple, 5 or 10. But one of the biggest ones is, of course, this confirmation bias, where we are actually actively going out to continuously validate our beliefs, not invalidate our beliefs. We use the exception to justify the rule, right? We've listened to a presentation, we say, I think it was a good presentation. Somebody else listens to the same presentation, they think it's a very bad presentation. How do we justify it? We find one person that agrees with us. And then we say, oh, many people agree with us. Yeah? That's what we're programmed to do that. It's unavoidable. So somehow we need a mechanism, and anybody that has made any breakthrough has discovered that mechanism. That's the thing that gave us hope, is to say, must be there. It's not just scientists. It's entrepreneurs. It's anybody that has a personal breakthrough. They must have discovered some mechanism to overcome all this barrage of biases, psychological biases that we have. Is there a simple way of doing that? And of course, Ellie gave us a hint with his foreword. He said it's really that simple. We can all be outstanding scientists. We can all learn from our experience if we try, but we need to have two simple mechanisms. We need something that helps us recognize that there's inconsistencies and the courage to face those inconsistencies. Now, of course, that immediately gave us a hint to say, what's an inconsistency? Is a gap. If I don't have an expectation, I won't have gaps. Of course, it's, ignorance is bliss. You want to be really happy, don't have expectations. Simple. If you want to learn from your experience, of course, then it's useful to have expectations. The higher, the better, because it creates gaps from which we can learn from, right? If I say, I'm going into this marriage, what do I want to have as an outcome? 5 years into the marriage, am I actually achieving those outcomes? If not, what is it that I can change? I'm going into business. I really wanted to make a big contribution. I'm a year into the job. What has happened? If I didn't have high expectations, I'm actually not giving myself an opportunity to learn. And then the last part is the mechanism to challenge basic assumptions. So we felt quite confident that if we just take this 2 steps, we expand it a little bit, we might be able to come up with a simple mechanism. So here's where we started. We said, let's start with a simple definition. So like any science, you start with classification. What do we mean? So we said, what do we mean by inconsistency? It's a kind of a mystery, or what Elie Schragenheim called a surprise. Where they come from, it's simply a significant gap. And by significant, I don't mean in size. Significant, I mean in terms of consequences. Right? We know from chaos theory that even a very small, tiny change can have big consequences. Other big gaps could have small consequences. So we shouldn't be looking for big gaps. We should be looking for consequential gaps. And there's a simple way of doing that, right? You could say, here's my expectation, here's the outcome. Doesn't matter how small this gap is. What's the consequences if I had met this expectation versus what's the cost of doing nothing? Right? And see at the top if there's a big difference in our happiness, in our profitability, in the amount of kids that we can get through school. That's the thing that's important. Not so much the size of this, but the size at the higher level of how these things impact the goal. Hypothesis is gaps between expectations and outcomes are caused by flawed paradigms. Shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. But specifically, bad assumptions related either to the expectation or to the decision about what we're going to do. Does it make sense to everybody? So if we go back, it's 2 valid hypotheses to check. Maybe our expectation was too high or too low. Right? And now we can learn from it and correct it in the future to have a better expectation. Or maybe it was that the actions that we planned to take to meet it was either not necessary, sufficient, or done in the right sequence. Happy so far, everybody? Okay. So I'm going to quickly scan through this, but I want to show you how we've used this process that Elliot left us with in terms of how to do a quick, rough analysis. This is the idea of it. Before you invest time to do the full analysis, to see, do I know what I'm talking about? Right? This is the purpose of the standing on the shoulders of giants. Do a quick analysis with a group of people that care about the same topic. We've tested this very successfully at the Odyssey. Works amazingly well. If you explain what each of the questions are. What's our goal? Develop a simple process to improve the probability. That's all that we're looking for. Just improve the probability to be able to learn the right lessons faster. Who's the giant? The scientific method, fields of positive psychology, behavioral economics, and all those other methods that I talked about. OODA loop, PDCA, Hansai in Japan, they have this thing called self-reflection. After every mistake that you make, there's a culture of reflect on it and decide what am I going to do to try and reduce the mistake and share it with other people. The enormity of the area not addressed is any area where we're seeing that they're not making significant progress. Whether that's in an individual's health, well-being, their sense of achievement, or whether it's an organization or within a field. Any place where we see significant progress is not being made, we can assume this is probably an area where they do not have a very simple process to learn from their experiences. Historical perspective, scientific method has been around for a long time. I think the key is 2 simple things that we realize quite quickly. It treats everything as an experiment. In the Odyssey program, one of the things that we started saying to people is when you have a gap, right, there's two ways to respond to a gap. The one is you can get depressed. My God, it turned out not to be my soulmate now, the end of my life, I really invested so much time with this person or with this career and I'm not being able to be successful. Or you can take the mindset of the scientist and go, oh, that's interesting. Really thought she was my soulmate. Turns out she wasn't. How do I know? Because she's no longer here, right? Very simple to validate or invalidate. And she stopped trying. There's another validation. So this part is, first of all, view everything as an experiment, which is sometimes difficult for us to view our life as an experiment. But every decision we make, every action we make is an experiment because it's based on a set of assumptions that are either right or wrong. And when we don't get the outcome that we expect, either our expectation was wrong or the actions. It's as simple, really, as that. The second part, I think, is this real, honest attempt to disprove your own hypothesis, not to keep on proving it. And that's tough. What we're sharing with you is not easy. It's hard work, but it can be fun. And when something is hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, right? Especially if you want to learn. So what's the conceptual difference? We think it's a thing that most humans haven't been trained to think like scientists. Right? In terms of simple, treating things as experiments and then trying to disprove whether your expectations are right and being surprised when it isn't, when it is right. Right? And learning from everyone. That's one of the things that I shared on the first day, is this amazing ability of Ellie and many of you in the audience to be motivated by failure. The only way you can be motivated by failure, right, if we are honest about not calling it some polite word, a failure, right, didn't get what I wanted or needed, is that I learn from it by saying what actually did work, what didn't work, and now I'm even more confident at my next attempt. That's the only condition that will allow me to get motivated and not depressed and suicidal from it. So, wrong assumption to test that this process can't be converted in a simple mechanism that anybody can use. And that's one of the reasons why I spoke to Barry, is he's dealing with a situation where, wow, this is tough. There's a lot of people that need a lot of attention. The consequences of them not improving is terrible for all the stakeholders involved, and they don't have time to mess around. They need something that works. So the full analysis, I've included this, and I'll go through it briefly at the end, so I won't bore you with that, but that's kind of the outcome of our full analysis. Why change, what to change to, how to cause a change, what are the step-by-step procedure, and what is it going to be in terms of POOGI. And for us, POOGI means using the process on itself. Right? Good, so I'll get back to that. So just define the mystery. What does it mean? Is what's the criteria for something to be a mystery or surprise, for something to be an important mystery, an important gap. Define that criteria if it's only yourself or with a team, because else you're going to be going all over the place. Identify what it is and specifically state it. If you have an S&T, fantastic, right? Either the strategy isn't being achieved, even after I've done the tactic, or the opposite. The strategy is being achieved without me doing the tactic. Define the consequences of it, because like I said, remember, we can't judge the significance based on how big the gap is. We can only judge the significance based on what will happen if we don't close the gap, even if it's a small gap. What's the cause? And here, have some initial hypothesis. Please don't allow people to say, I don't know. Used to irritate the living hell out of Ellie when you said to him, I don't know. Think, for God's sake, right? You have some idea. Come up with some hypothesis. So that's the step. Come up with some and then build backwards, and I'll show you a graphic of that in both cases. Look for the flawed paradigm, identify the conflict and corrective actions, and then document and share the lessons learned in terms of expectations. So here's what the process looks like. This is how we've been explaining it. We've been testing it with people all the way from about 16 years old, people that can't read and write, that we have to put pictures in. But we say, just to start with this, what's the expectation, what's the outcome? right? Draw a picture, put a number in, whatever it is. Smiley face, not smiley face, simple as that. Now explain to us what would have happened if you had this. How would it have helped you achieve your goal or the organizational goal? And then tell us what will happen if you don't do anything. If we don't change this outcome, how will it negatively impact the goal? Then you decide, is it important or not? Not before that. We've done that. Then we encourage them to say, build downwards. Not PhDs and current reality trees, but just simply put it down a bullet point form. If you feel more comfortable with cause and effect, do it like that. But just tell, in order to have achieved that, what must we have seen? What effect must have existed? In order to have achieved that, what must we have seen? Until we get down to a list of actions. If you want to be really nice or sophisticated, of course you can put in the actions where they belong. But the idea is just to get people to tell the story, right? Why did you have this expectation? What should have happened? And then to ask them to check each one by one. Did you actually do this tactic or set of tactics? Okay, so you bought the bicycle, the training bicycle, or that ab machine. You bought it, right? That was one of the actions that I'm gonna buy that thing. Did you actually use it? Really? According to the instructions? No, not quite. Okay, so then why would you have an expectation to lose any kind of weight, right? This is the same in business, right? We also pick up communication gaps here. The guy says, I did it. And you say, what did you do? How did you do it? And frequently, oh my goodness. Okay, I didn't understand what you mean. So this is an important thing. Just be as sarcastic as possible. Try to be polite. Really? You know? Helps, even with yourself. Then start looking at the effects. Did we achieve it? Yes, we did. Really? What did you achieve? How did you measure it? Right? And keep on checking until you find out where this chain of cause and effect broke down. Maybe it's already here. This thing becomes red. No wonder the rest is red. This thing is green, but that one is red. Guess what? We missed something here. There was an insufficiency here. This one is green. That one is red. Guess what? We found it. There's somewhere here. We didn't do something here. All of them are green. The top is red. We missed something there. It's simple as that. Try to keep it as simple as possible. Don't try to impress people with how good your diagrams look. If they feel more comfortable with bullet lists, just let them do that. You can teach them later once they start asking, right? And then to say, okay, so the fact that we didn't do what we were supposed to do or didn't achieve what we were supposed to do, what's the reason for that? And get them to say, this new fact that I'm now aware of, I assumed this would happen, it turns out it didn't. Write it down there because it helps explain why this happened. And then on the other side, the opposite of that, which can explain the assumption we made of why we had this expectation. Okay? So that's the process. So, of course, the learning is understanding under what conditions this is true, under what conditions this is not true. Really try to be simple, and then what can you do about it? In this specific case, can you correct it? Can you prevent future mistakes? Where else do you make this type of mistake? What we then do is we say, okay, so once we understand it, if you want to know a bit more how to get to an assumption, there's some kind of causality. It's always somebody's fault, right? You can always blame somebody for either doing something or not doing something. But we want to go a little bit deeper. It might be that it was their own bad assumption that caused them to do it, or it might be a bad policy or rule or measurement that was driving them to do it, which means that there is some higher authority, their wife, their husband, their boss, the government, whose rule was bad, and that caused them to do it, right? So teach some basic cause and effect. And then the last one is then what we're using is this change matrix cloud to get them to now say, okay, now that I understand a bad assumption, what's going to block me from getting this adopted by myself or by others? So here's my action. I want to adopt this new insight and benefit from it, get others to benefit. That's the change. At the same time, there's also pressure not to change. And then try to fill in as honestly as you can the rest. What would be the benefit, the thing that I would feel I would have to give up on if I just change this? At the same time, what's the crocodiles, the undesirable effects or pain points that won't go away? The negative of not making the change, not adopting the new paradigm. What's a pot of gold? If I adopted it, what's the crutches? And then how do I break this conflict? 4 simple methods that I showed on the day 1. I'm not going to go in detail. I'll just explain briefly. Hopefully it will be simple enough. We explain it only with pictures. Right? We have 4 methods. We have a change plus method that says treat this thing as the half-baked solution. In order for that to give me both of these and none or few of these, I need to add 2 pluses to it. One thing that will help me ensure that this new paradigm or new change will not jeopardize any of my valid mermaids. Of course, I need to check whether they're valid or not. The second one, it won't result in any risks that are significant, substantial. So I ask the person directly, what do you need to add? And frequently they come up with the answers. They have enough intuition. Second one, just the opposite. And we ask them to do all 4. Not change plus. So let's assume you shouldn't adopt it, right? Is there anything that you can add to this that will still give you the full or most of the pot of gold? Is there anything that you need to add to this to make sure that the crocodiles, the bad ones, do go away? This one is change plus, not change. Is to say, actually, what we realize is that there are certain conditions when we should make a change in our assumptions. What are those conditions? When should we make a change and when shouldn't we? Just that becomes a new rule. Right? So the damage is coming from not that the fact that we are aware of both rules, it's that the fact that we are applying the rule in the wrong place. So for example, we have this instinct that someone is going to be bad for us. Right? When should we listen to that instinct and therefore run away? Right? When should we try to actively ignore it? Because if we don't, we will become racist. Right? You go into a dark alley, you see somebody that your gut feel is telling you this is unsafe. Run away. You know, if you're accused of being a racist later, that's fine. But don't walk into a shop and you see that type of person and act as if they're a major threat to you. That's bad. So it's when should I use the rule, when shouldn't I use the rule? And then the last one is a more difficult one. It's just thinking out of the box. Is there any other way that I can get more of that and less of this? Right. So here's a quick example. As I mentioned, we've got all of this in the text, but the expectation gap is we wanted sales to increase. Turns out it didn't. The sales should have come back from selling more to existing clients, but also to some new clients. And we traced down what are the effects that must have existed for us to get there, and the actions that should have been taken to achieve that objective. Right? That's where we are. So we encourage people to do that. Very few people do this. Right? They actually don't sit down and go through to try to learn. To say, first of all, let me build what should have happened. Don't immediately go into the current reality tree. First, build almost a future reality tree that you should have built at the time that you embarked on it, right? Or a very basic version of a strategy and tactic tree. So we, again, ask people to build it in a very simple way. If they feel more comfortable just putting bullet points down, that's fine. Because what we want to do is to do the checks. And we say, okay, so you said that these are the 5 things that you need to have done. This one, we visit existing clients more, replenishing on actual consumption. Did you do that? And frequently the answer is yes. And we say, really? Tell me, what did you do? How did you do it? And then we take the second one. So I'll just show you, in this case, what we found was that they did this. The one thing that they didn't do was they didn't help the customer set the buffers. So their understanding of what TOC replenishment is to replenish on actual consumption. The client sells 1, you give them 1. They sell 2, you give them 2. They didn't realize you also should kind of change the target levels, because else all you're doing is if the inventory was high in the first place, it will stay high. If they didn't have enough inventory, they will keep on not having enough inventory. But it was a communication gap, and we could see where it came from, because people try to simplify something, and they say, all that you need to do is just get them to agree that we will replenish based on actual consumption. What was the bad assumption when we asked them? For those people that did actually understand, bad assumption is they'll never agree to it. They won't agree that we start controlling their norms or target levels. Now you know where they're stuck. So let them draw the conflict, explain all 4 aspects, and give them the 4 methods and help them break the conflict. So I'll quickly do a case study, one interesting one, and I was struggling to think about which ones to include because there are really many interesting ones. But this one is one that really my motto in life is, if I'm not scared, I get scared. Right? Clear sign, if you're not scared, you're getting too confident. Right? Be humble. Don't think you know. So I was asked by somebody that was involved in this project called Healthy People 2010, started in 1998, contained 467 objectives designed to serve as a framework of improving the health of all people in the USA. Now, of course, as a TOC guy, when you hear that, you go, no chance. Before you even tell me the results, right? Probably you didn't achieve most of it, simply because you were trying to do too many things at the same time. But I tried to be very polite and remain humble, so I listened carefully, and I said what they wanted to do was they wanted to, by 2010, to do a really good quantitative review about what was achieved and what not, and try to see if they can understand why. So we started using this learning from experience process, or what I now call learning from experiment, to just take some of the nervousness about it, to say this is a wonderful experiment. But it was an experiment, so let's check if we can learn from it. It was objective number 27, reducing tobacco use via new legislation on health risk warnings on packets. This was what number 27 was all about. Basically saying, going from this, like some portion of the packet containing a health risk, to going something like that. And you can imagine what the assumption is here, right? This is printed too small. People can't read it. Because they can't read it, they're not aware of it. So how do I make them aware of it? I make this much bigger, and then I put some pictures down. If they couldn't read, what are you going to look like if you don't change, right? And the assumption is this will really help. Yes? This will really help, because the assumption is that people either continue to smoke because they're not aware of the consequences, or they need to be frequently reminded, or they really don't know how bad it is for them. Yeah? Sounded common sense to them. So here's what happened. So some of the sort of leading indicators were showing quite positive. So they had excise taxes increased. I thought if we make it too expensive, some people will stop buying. We ban it from print advertising. That might help. And they were very successful. If you look at what they actually achieved, very successful in terms of that. So even though they didn't meet their target, they still got a significant increase in terms of being able to remove that. Smoke-free workplaces was very successful. Warning coverage was very successful. They went from 15% of the packet to 50% of the packet, basically being a warning. And you can imagine the obvious next step is what actually happened. Did it actually help to get fewer people to start smoking, or more people to quit? And unfortunately, that's where the assumption broke down. Actually didn't. If you look at this, the target was 80% cessation attempts, actual people trying to quit. The baseline was 45. After 2010, it was 48%. And percentage of adult smokers, target was 12%. It was cut it in half. Very ambitious target, so they got one thing right. Actual was 21%. And it was interesting, they got an immediate benefit, and then after that, almost nothing. So the immediate benefit about 2004, after that, absolutely no change. So what's the conclusion from this? Very simple, the warnings are not big enough. This is not a joke, that's their conclusion. Clearly, we now have evidence. You see, I told you the whole thing should be a warning. And you got me to compromise on 50%. Can you see what the bloody impact is? This is one of the lessons that they've now learned. So, of course, we did this, and I won't bore you with all the details. So we started with this to say, okay, clearly there's a big expectation gap. You wanted to halve it. In fact, It didn't get close to halving. Do we still want this? And the guy said, absolutely. If we can get this done, the system impact is reduce smoking-related illness, disability, and health. System impact, reduce $193 billion in lost productivity and health cost. Yes, we absolutely still want it. Do you still want to change this? What's the risk of doing nothing? Of course, you're not going to get those benefits. Okay, now build downwards. So what is the effect that you must have seen? More and more, those that smoke considering to start realize it just ain't worth the risk. And for that to have happened, every time someone smokes, they or others see shocking warnings as reminders of risk. So if the person is really not paying attention, somebody else would go, did you see what this is going to do to you? Right? So what was the plan? Changes to increase the exposure on the packet from 15 to 50%, plus all the other things. Make it more expensive, take it out of the media, don't advertise it, etc. Was this done? Absolutely it was done. Very successfully done. Amazing efforts. Was it achieved? Not so much. So it's kind of yellow. Got some initial benefit. Every time someone wants to smoke, they or others see shocking warnings, or they just don't look at it. And in fact, a big niche industry came up with producing nice little cigarette box covers, right? Just slip it in a cover, don't have to pay attention to it. Next one, intermediate effect. Only some realized smoking ain't worth the rest. The rest found ways not to be reminded. And what was a bad assumption? The hypothesis, shocking warnings do help, but is not sufficient, because most people that smoke are in fact already aware of the risks, and despite that continue. Why? Because it does satisfy some positive need. And that was the bad assumption on this side. Right? Is that we ignored that completely. People don't smoke because they're not aware of the risk. They smoke because it does provide some positive satisfaction. Satisfy a basic human need. So we asked them to fill in this. And again, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but the essence is, on the one side, don't change. Right? Give in to these guys that says, you see, I told you the whole thing should be a big warning. Or in fact, we should ban it just totally. Just get over it and just ban it totally. Other guys said, well, maybe there's another way. What if we could, rather than focus on the negatives of smoking, find some way to put programs in place that provide them alternative mechanisms for the things that smoking do give them. So if it's a good stress mechanism, relief mechanism, what other mechanisms can we offer them for free to provide them with that? Whether that's training or something else, right? And they then thought, okay, so what's the positive of this? Is really improve the probability of reaching our target. What is the thing that I have to give up on? And this was interesting to get people to share openly these fears, right? And the advice here is, don't think of this as a system need, think of it as a personal need. It's a shareholder, stakeholder of that. They are terrified of doing it. Ask them directly, what are you afraid will happen? And I said, well, what if these guys come out and sue us? Because clearly our hypothesis turned out to be wrong. Right? And imagine all the costs involved for doing this in all stakeholders. The crocodile, sorry, for some reason the text is not showing up, but you can imagine, of course, the crocodile there is that the number of people starting is not going down significantly. The number of people continuing is not going down. It's still about 21% rather than a 24% targeted. And then what are the major risks here? And to read it from the screen here is, we are concerned that this will take a long time. We're not sure we have the answer for it. We've already invested in this other direction. How embarrassing it will now be to change the direction. And we just got them to say, what are the bad assumptions? Is there any way that we can prevent this from jeopardizing that? So this doesn't mean stop all these other things, but it just means if it's going to cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to go from 50% to 75%, don't do it. You've already proven to yourself it's not going to have a significant impact. It doesn't mean you have to back off completely. Just don't push it so hard and don't waste more of taxpayers' money on it. And some of the negatives here is, are there already people that are very successful with these programs? And they are. They immediately mentioned the list and said, actually, we're embarrassed because these guys are not getting any funding from us. Right? One, for those who have read it, you know, easy way to stop smoking. These guys have got a success rate of over 90%. Are they being funded? No. So that's the example I wanted to share. I'm not going to go and hand over to Barry to share his example. Hopefully even more fascinating than mine.
This is one of many examples that I've been able to do since I learned the process from Alan. I work with children with autism. I consult to a variety of different school districts to help teachers and other people work with children with autism. Autism is greatly increasing recently. Is there anybody in the room, or just out of curiosity, how many people have some experience with children with autism? A family member or somebody? Quite a few. It has been getting more and more attention in the media. There's been more awareness. And it's a very significant problem in terms of children's ability to communicate, to socially interact, and generally live independent lives. The general big giant in the field, you might say, is applied behavior analysis. That's what I do. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst. And we have shown dramatic outcomes for probably 25 to 50% of children that are diagnosed with autism have really unbelievably success. The other children have success, but it's much more moderate. The outcomes are not nearly as impressive as they are for a subset of the children with autism. So, although it's generally accepted that applied behavior analysis has made tremendous gains in the last 30 years ago or so, there's still a tremendous need for dramatically more improvement than is currently available. So one of the big problems is eliminating dangerous and severe... dangerous behavior problems. Some children with autism can have very significant behavior problems. Things like self-injurious behavior, banging heads against the wall until bleeding, or just tantrums, falling to the floor, crying, all kinds of severe behavior problems. It's a major obstacle to teaching, to social interaction, to being able to participate in society. They can be caused by a whole wide variety of different factors: not wanting to do things, access to attention, sensory sensitivity, a wide variety of problems. And there are hundreds and maybe thousands of studies on this topic that have generally been extremely successful. We are very successful at treating these behavior problems now, and I'll oversimplify the treatment process a little bit. The basic is you do an analysis, you figure out why the problem is occurring. Let's say it's because the child doesn't want to do something. And then the next step is, if the child doesn't want to do something, you design a treatment based on that analysis. So if the child doesn't want to do something, say because it's too hard, maybe we'll teach them to ask the teacher for help, is one simple strategy. But if the child could have the same behavior, say they were doing it because they wanted to get access to attention, we might teach them to tap someone on the shoulder to get attention. So the same, it's not based on what the behavior is. A lot of times people come, what's the treatment for biting? There is no treatment for biting. The treatment is based on the why the behavior occurs. Okay, now a common problem in treatment is failure to maintain the gains. So children will have dramatically effective treatments, but then a year later, 2 years later, the problems are back. So, for example, I've had several students that have had dramatically successful treatments, and 2, 3, 4 years later, someone calls me up and says, "Oh my gosh, you know what's happening now." I've also had several children that I've worked with who were really treated by internationally acclaimed experts and had dramatic success at, say, 5 or 6 years old, and then all of a sudden at 8 or 9 I get a referral for a child who, and I see the videos with the internationally acclaimed experts, but yet the problems come back. So here's the gap. The severe behavior, we expected that we're going to do the treatment and the problem behavior is not going to come back, but in actuality, many times, despite having received what seemed to be an effective treatment, the behavior came back maybe a year later, maybe 6 months later, maybe 2 years later, but it does come back. So the impact on the goal is very significant in the sense of we expect that that's how society is going to save thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's also how we're going to dramatically improve the children's lives. But the actual outcome is children can have dramatically lower quality of life, and nothing reduces the quality of life for the children if these behaviors are not reduced or they learn alternative skills to be able to participate in society. And of course, one of the major justifications for the treatment is that society is going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars over time if these behaviors are successfully treated, and they don't save any money. In fact, it can cost more, because when there's a big difference between having a 7-year-old with severe behavior problems and having a 14 or 15-year-old with severe behavior problems, it's much more significant. Very important gap. So, severe behavior problems, we expect it not to return. The treatment is assessed, to make sure we are following the process very well, and the plan changes. I feel that in behavior analysis, and certainly in my practice, I feel like we do the standard procedures very, very well, and generally are as effective. The problem is the maintaining over time. The treatment, it starts to fall apart when the treatment is implemented because a certain problem comes up. When teachers or parents are working with the children, they're doing little subtle things that are preventing the behavior from occurring, and they're not even aware of it. So it might be something like the child wants something and you're a little bit afraid to say no, because if you say no, that might cause the problem to occur. And so they're starting to get little problems. But we do continue until the severe behavior problems are eliminated. And then just, why do they come back? And the realization is the measurement. We measure progress by how frequently do the problem behaviors occur. So if I come and I start, a common presentation at meetings will be something like this. I started with a student this year, and when we started, there were 137 self-injurious behaviors per day. And now, after 6 months of treatment, we've had 3 consecutive months with 0 episodes of self-injurious behavior, and you can even have other estimates. There's been no hospitalizations, there's been no tissue damage to the head, all kinds of serious measures. And really, the bad assumption there is frequency is a very bad way to measure progress. It leads directly to the problem of making bad decisions. It's a very TOC analysis in the sense of directly out of the goal, in the sense of the measurement leads teachers to make bad decisions. So they don't challenge the student when they ask for something and the teacher or the parent doesn't want to give it to them, because they're afraid that the behavior is going to come back. And when you have 6 months of successful treatment, you do not want those behaviors to come back, and people are afraid to push, which is exactly what's necessary.
I think just a quick comment there for
Sure.
what we're seeing in business is, if you think about UDIs appearing, right? We have a common tendency, we want to solve problems. So you fix these things. What you don't realize is by fixing them, you're removing early warning signs. And this is exactly the same thing. We had this aha moment because we were experiencing exactly the same thing. These things, and people find ways of dealing with them and suppressing them, right? But they don't realize that by suppressing them, they're actually hiding what's really underlying. You haven't changed the course, so they'll keep on popping up. And that's what the parents, the treatment people, they've all developed mechanisms to suppress these things, and the frequency drops dramatically. And of course, as soon as they stop taking the time to do those things, it just pops back up again.
So we're getting the warning. So I'll go quickly through this. So we want to the not change is to try and maintain, and that's generally the suggestion. Okay, the goal for now is we've had 3 months of successive treatment. Now we're going to go for 6 months of success, or 1 year without a problem. But it doesn't help much if you haven't addressed the other side. The student has to learn to respond in novel situations. How do they do when there's a substitute present? How do they do at home? How do they do at the mall? How do they do when they're sick? The mermaid, I think, is that we can dramatically show immediate improvements, and people are afraid of that going away. And the big insight is you have to not only change the measurement, you also have to change the treatment, in the sense that you have to constantly be challenging and moving forward if you're going to achieve the long-term gains.
Absolutely. I think this ties in very well with what Rami and Ishai was saying here. In terms of organizations, this is the thing that they talked about in terms of accountability. When people become professional firefighters and you start removing the fires, they become very nervous. They don't know how to contribute anymore. So that's, imagine parents dealing with this problem as well as the people trying to treat it. They become so good at maintaining these things that are problematic behaviors and keeping them low, because on the one side, this is their prime measurement, but also they're making an impact, right? The parents are going, oh, I can't believe the change, right? So, but they don't realize that they're actually removing early warnings that something is going wrong. So what have we learned here? It's essential to make this learning from experience a habit. If you don't make it a habit, and you can go and check the 5 whys in Toyota, you can go and check Hansai in Japan, the OODA loop, all of these things, they are really good processes, but if you don't get them to become a habit, people stop using them. How do you get them to become a habit? You make sure people get benefit when they use them. You make sure that they have the support that they need to use them. You make sure that they see the authority figures doing exactly the same thing and asking them to contribute to the process. Make it an institution. Every week, regardless of whether we had successes or failures, let's review what happened and see what we can learn from it. What worked, what didn't work. Of course, there are very good positive results, but we're trying to be scientists, so we don't want to get carried away with these positive results. We know we are just starting. A lot of additional testing needs to happen, and I'm hoping that some of you will help us continue this testing. I hope that the process is simple enough that you'll try. We're already applying it to some other areas, and I'm very excited about those. The alumni this year for Odyssey is going to do exactly this. We're going to explore some new territories in terms of why do we repeat the same mistakes in various aspects of your life. So those that come will pick an aspect of their life where they have some concern. It seems I keep on repeating the same mistake. Why is it? Let's test the process and see what we can learn from it, and also what we can learn on how to improve the process. Make it even simpler and faster and more effective. Why is it difficult to quit a bad habit? What can we learn from that using this process? And the private sector, we're including functionality now in our new Harmony web application to do this type of audit, both the cause and effects as well as the change matrix, because we want to encourage people to submit what they're doing so that other people can learn from it. Because this is a new process, and you learn by seeing really good examples. Why do successful organizations seldom capitalize on DCEs? And why do so many companies that have had good successes with TOC, including good champions, why aren't they spreading it internally? Doesn't make sense. This is a good inconsistency mystery to start with. Public sector, we're tackling some interesting projects with the public sector in terms of countries that have both critical skill shortage, but at the same time they have very high unemployment. How can that be? What are the main causes in not meeting demand for basic services? So, just to summarize, mysteries, surprises are fantastic gifts. The biggest lesson here, I think, is have high expectations. Be very careful that you don't go into a mode of fixing things, because you're removing very valuable early warning signs that there's something fundamentally wrong deeper down. Don't suppress those things. Stand back. Resist the temptation to just fix them, because it makes you feel like you're contributing, and say, why is this things happening? Each important mystery should be investigated. Make sure that you don't waste time to investigate things that are big gaps but are inconsequential. So always help yourself and others look at the top. What's a reaction? I think the process, especially using the 4 impacts of change, to not just stop at the conclusion about what the operational cause was. What was the behavior that caused this? Who didn't do what they should or did do what they shouldn't have? Go deeper down, use the cloud as a way of finding out what was the bad assumption, and use the cloud as a way of checking what will be the conflict to adopt a new assumption. This thing I like, it's one of the people in the experiment, the CEO of a company, said to me, hard work is always required. So please don't tell my people to work smarter. They need to do some hard stuff. So we changed the motto. work smarter, think harder. Some hard stuff is going to be required. And please join us to share and further test this process. We've been testing this for a very long time. I think if you don't even try, of course you're not going to get the results. Start looking at things as experiments. That will help you overcome that. And if you have something like a tool like an S&T that's explicitly stating all the assumptions, makes the job so much easier. How do you learn the right lessons? Ask yourself, really? Or get a brutally honest mentor, right? That really helps. Many of us had one for a long time. Get a new one. You need them. We all have blind spots. We try to learn its operational causes. Don't stop there. Go deeper down. And finally, make sure you learn the right lessons. Ask what other decisions can be impacted by this bad assumption. And the last slide is from the Odyssey program. This is a summary of the conclusions that we've reached so far in terms of what are the bad assumptions. 5 obstacles that we all face: constraints, complexity, conflicts, uncertainty, bad choices. These are the common assumptions that causes us to respond to these things in ways that don't get us more goal units. Here are the enabling assumptions on that side. Thank you very much for your attention. So we've run out of time. I apologize for that, but you're welcome to ask any questions during the break times or send emails. It's